Action scenes are a really hard thing to make. They take a lot of careful preparation and planning in order to make them safe for actors to perform and to make them look believable. I find a lot of Western action movies though fail with this particular type of scene, rapidly cutting between different angles and having the camera shaking all over the place, bathing the scene in darkness, and basically making it so you can't really see the fight. The fight scenes that are more impressive are the ones that you can see the intricacy of every move playing out. You can feel the rhythm and flow of the fight, and you begin to move in time with the actors on screen, even if you don't notice it. Every Frame of Painting has a fantastic video about Jackie Chan that explains this concept really well. He talks about how the rhythm of Jackie Chan's fights helps to elevate not only the action, but also the comedy. Other action legends understand this as well. The 10-on-1 fight from Ip Man starring Donnie Yen is a great example of a fight scene with a fantastic rhythm. Each punch is placed with precision timing so that it not only feels impactful, but also flows together in a satisfying way. It doesn't waste a single move on being flashy for the sake of it. Not a single piece is out of place, not one extra is where they shouldn't be, and on top of that, it's brutal. I bring all this up because it's important for understanding what Sifu is attempting to emulate, and how it makes you feel like you're playing one of these movies. Sifu is an action game released in 2022 with a really interesting core mechanic. Each time you die, you get older. This core means that the narrative can be structured around the fact that the player can keep coming back and it can account for it, unlike in so many other games where any death is wiped under the rug as non-canon, or just ignored entirely. Unlike a lot of action games where the main focus is on the amount of damage you do and the numbers linked to your stats, Sifu shifts its focus to the player and asks them to master this rhythm I keep talking about that all the action masters like Donnie Yen and Jackie Chan are so intimately familiar with. The game is hard when you start out and you're not used to the mechanics. You will get your ass handed to you because enemies not only hit hard, but hit fast. The main thing to learn in this game is the parry timing. I still don't entirely know what it is. I know that it's right before an attack lands, but sometimes those attacks come at you so quick I start to wonder how I'm supposed to react to it. The only way to know is by memorizing combos, and I don't know if that's something I'm able to do for an entire game's worth of attacks. The timing is extremely tight. There were several times where I felt I should have landed a parry, but all I did was block, which isn't nearly as effective. The only problem with this parrying system being the core of the combat is it's entirely possible for you to get put into a situation where one failed parry is the death of you. What I mean by this is that if you fail to get into the rhythm and the enemies land every hit of their combo, it's very easy to die in seconds. Each death you build without clearing an encounter will increase how many years you age upon death, which leads to my main criticism of the game. It's very easy for multiple deaths to spiral into making the game extremely difficult. The player is already being punished by the fact of getting older with each death, which should they get old enough will lock them out of certain upgrades and abilities, but when you die repeatedly to the same encounter, it's possible to blast through all the lives available to you in a matter of minutes. I saw myself at times aging 5 years per death, which given that you only have 50 years to beat the whole game can make certain runs impossible to finish. The game relies on repetition and memorization as a key part of its difficulty curve and its overall play experience, which isn't a problem. In fact, it's a key component to learning any martial art. I spent 8 years studying karate, and I cannot tell you how many times we did a class where we covered the absolute basics. Black belts learning how to punch as if it was the first time they'd stepped into a class. Coming back to these basics even after years of practicing can be a refreshing experience. Instead of focusing on the complexities of your next kata, or how and why these moves are structured the way they are, you have an opportunity to refine your craft even further and gain a new level of mastery. The game falters, however, in how it uses death as part of this learning experience. Contrary to a Souls-like, where death can be experimented with and used to gain new knowledge, each death here means your chances of getting through the encounter get slimmer. With each decade that passes, you will lose a piece of your health bar, but to balance this out, the amount of damage you do goes up. This continues until you reach your 70s, at which point the next death will be game over and you will restart the current area from the age you were when you started it. This is not really a good balance in my opinion, as the game isn't about damage numbers, it's about flow. Your parry window doesn't get any wider, which means that if parrying is what you're struggling with, then that extra damage isn't really going to help, and in fact, cutting your health will only amplify the problem. There is an option for limiting this frustration though, and that is dropping the game down from Disciple to Student difficulty. The enemies will do less damage, be less aggressive, and use less complex combos, as well as removing the death stacking mechanic from the game, meaning that you now have 50 lives to get through the whole thing. This is how I chose to play for this video, so a lot of what I'll say will be filtered through that experience. The actual attacks performed and most of the rhythm doesn't change, so this will still give a fairly accurate estimation of what the game is like, even on Disciple. I did play the first 2 levels on Disciple though, so that's why I've been able to talk about the difficulty thus far. I know some would consider this a lesser version of the game, with some of the intended challenge removed, but I still found this to be a plenty testing experience, and I think it's a good stepping stone for doing a Disciple run later on. I don't necessarily recommend everyone immediately drop the game to Student the second you get into it, but play through the first 2 levels on Disciple, see how you feel, and then adjust your difficulty accordingly. This is how I got the best balance for my abilities and reflexes, and I still found the game to be a fun challenge regardless. The animations in the game are extremely fluent. It's got a weird mix of coherency but also speed and brutality that can be seen in many an action movie. The moves your character performs are very interesting and are based on the style of Kung Fu known as Pak Mai, a style focused on close range striking which is displayed perfectly as optimal play in Sifu is keeping within striking distance of your enemies at all times. It pushes an aggressively defensive playstyle. What I mean is that you're acting in defense when you're fighting, you are deflecting and countering your opponent rather than being the aggressor, but you are encouraged to stay close and remain in the action instead of backing off. Bosses keep this up as well. Many bosses' attacks are more damaging at longer ranges since the timing of deflections needs to be far tighter than if you were standing right in front of them and your counter can be more or less immediate. The only problem I really have with the bosses is how underdeveloped they are. Their designs and movesets are amazing to look at and fight against, but all of them are super one note and not very interesting. Even Yang, the main villain of the story, the reason for the whole revenge subplot, I couldn't tell you a single thing about him, and that's a shame, as maybe the villains had more development, and even if they had a thematic relevance, the fights would have so much more weight behind them. In regards to the levels, probably my favourite in the game is the museum, as it does quite a lot with the art style and has the player going through a lot of interesting displays, but also some really abstract, surreal rooms towards the end of the level before we come face to face with Karaoke. I particularly like when the walls of the level appear to vanish as we are left in a formless cloud of colour that we fight enemies in while only being able to see the vague outline of them and yourself. The art style reminds me a lot of Dishonored, where it's a gritty kind of cell shading, but not quite cell shading. It's an art style that I really like in games, and I think it's one that will age very well, and I believe that Sifu will look great for years to come. The levels are really interesting, as many of them have environmental objects to use or counters to leap over, which can help to keep the choreography of the fights interesting. The best fights in film don't just take place in an environment, but use it in some way to amplify the fight, and Sifu does this most of the time. There are a couple places where the arena could be a little more utilised. I think adding in some kind of wall jump attack or being able to throw enemies over balconies could have helped add some flair. It would encourage a level of mastery that would mean being able to style it out as well as be efficient in your takedowns, in a similar vein to action games like Devil May Cry. I hope that this has shown some of the ways that Sifu feels like playing through a hodgepodge of all the best martial arts action movies. I really enjoyed the small amount of time I spent with this game despite not diving into every single aspect, because I don't think this video needs to be a comprehensive look at everything Sifu does, but how it pulls off one specific idea, and on that front, I believe that as a playable version of action movies in a similar vein to those of legends like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan and Donnie Yen, it's a challenging, beautiful, satisfying masterpiece that I recommend to anyone who's even mildly interested in what I've shown today. I'm sure there's someone out there who could tell me about all the intricacies of every attack or every reference, but I'll leave that to them. I enjoyed Sifu for how it made this particular style of movie playable, and hope more games attempt this kind of thing in the future.